Today, I think the sharing about the 100 years of the greatest pandemic in human history will be suitable time for both of us. When I said that, Fo's eye is sparkling. But when I say, a bird landed on the river's mouth, starting the pandemic, killing 50 million people, she looks quite nervous. Oh, it is really what I want. Many people believed that the Spanish flu will perish mankind, completing what was left after the war. In September 1918, World War I was coming to an end. In Manchester, a long line of soldiers and female workers flocked to the road to greet Prime Minister Lloyd George, their war leader. Between the lines of people from Piccadilly all the way to Albert Square, nothing could stop George's happiness, especially when the Allies kept sending news of victory. However, that evening in the town hall, the British Prime Minister developed a sore throat, fever, and paralysis. During the next 10 days, George was so weak that he could not walk and had to wear a breathing tube. The British press tried to hide the Prime Minister's condition, worrying that the Germans might take advantage of the news to spread their propagandas. Only the ones closest to George knew about his serious illness. The British Prime Minister was later saved, but many of his citizens were not so lucky. Outside the Manchester City Hall, the Spanish fly had killed 150 people in the city only after a week of the outbreak. Across 95 cities in England and Wales, similar death rate was recorded. A total of 7,740 people died in the first week of November alone. There were more flowers and more tombs springing up next to the young Englishmen who were put down by the German muzzle. At the time when the Spanish flu epidemic hit Manchester City, Ada Darwin was only 7 years old. She lived with her parents and 5 siblings in a house in the Greenheath district. It was Sunday, November 17th. My mother took me to bed, Ada said. I remember my head was hurting really bad, so I told my mother stop Nora from talking too much. She gave me a headache. In fact, headaches and fever are among the first symptoms of the Spanish flu. Ada became infected, followed by her mother, Jen Berry, 34, her younger sister Edith, 2 months, then her older brother Frederick, 9, younger brother Austin, 2, Noel, 4, and oldest sister, Nora, 12 years old. The Spanish flu progressed rapidly, causing pleural effusions and drowning the victims by the fluid inside their body. Death by Spanish flu is characterized by cyanotic plaques on the body, testament to the lungs being flooded and not able to absorb enough oxygen. Ada was lucky not to face such death, but her mother did. On Tuesday, November 19th, the Ada's whole family became infected, and her grandmother and Aunt Annie had to pick her and her younger brother Austin up. The doctor said their condition was lighter, so they needed to be isolated from other family members. I remember my mother's eyes looking at me when I changed clothes to go with Aunt Annie, Ada said. She looked very sad. At that time, I thought it was simply because I had to leave her for a while, but now that I think about it, I realize she was sad because she knew she would never see me again. Ada's mother died the next day. Next was her younger brother Noel and her father, Frederick Berry, a 38-year-old officer of the Royal Army who became infected while serving at the Salford Military Hospital. Their funeral was held on November 29th according to the military ceremony. Ada remembers clearly the moment when the funeral caravan passed through elementary school that year. It was like a movie playing in my head, she said. The black horses with ostrich feathers on their mane, followed by the soldiers holding guns and my father's coffin covered with the British flag. My mother's coffin was placed in a hearse with a large glass box. Ada and her remaining siblings were not the only children orphaned by the pandemic that year. It is estimated that the Spanish flu infected 1/3 of the world's population. In just 3 major outbreaks between 1918 and 1919, it killed 250,000 people in the UK, 676,000 in the US, 400,000 in Japan, 1.85 million Indians, equal to 6% of India's population, and 138,000 Egyptians, equivalent to 10% of their population. In areas isolated from the world, where the population did not accumulate immunity from virus, they were even more affected. In Western Samoa, an island nation in the Pacific Ocean, a quarter of the population was wiped out. The entire Inuit community and indigenous people living in Alaska were also killed. Around the world, Spanish flu has killed 50 to 100 million people, 5 to 10 times more than the soldiers who died during World War I. The death toll was so high that society stagnated. The health system was overloaded. There was no more place for funerals, and people had to dig mass graves. In the US, many companies were closed due to sick employees. Basic services like mail delivery and garbage collection also stopped working. Some farms abandoned their crops because there were no harvesters left. In the fateful year of 1919, when antibiotics and vaccines were not yet invented, many people believed that the Spanish flu would end humanity, finishing what the war couldn't complete. But by the end of 1919, the Spanish flu pandemic had ended. It ended surprisingly. Not because humans had found a way to control the virus, but because it had killed all infected people, while developed immunity in the lucky people who survived. When the corpses of the victims decomposed in the ground, the Spanish flu virus also went extinct. It buried with itself a lot of mysteries that even scientists could not explain. Where did Spanish flu come from? Not from Spain as its name suggests. It is called the Spanish flu because Spain was a neutral country during World War II, where disease reports were first published. In countries of the two warring factions, information on the disease was hidden because of fears of being taken advantage of by the enemy. Unlike regular flu pandemics that target only the elderly and children under 5. Why did the Spanish flu kill even the most healthy adults, especially in the 20 to 40 age group? What lesson can we learn from this most dangerous pandemic? To learn from or to prepare for similar pandemics in the future? Jeffrey Taubenberger wore 2-layer gloves, a gas mask and a full body suit like medical workers who were present in West Africa during the Ebola pandemic. He is a virologist and the head of molecular research at the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Taubenberger was required to do so. He even had to scan the iris in order to gain access to a research facility in the US. It was under the control of the FBI. The reason? One of the freezers here contains a very dangerous specimen, which if accidentally let out, or somehow the terrorists get a hold of it, then disaster could be triggered on a global scale. What made the FBI so vigilant was no different than the rarest specimens of Spanish flu virus. They were collected from the bodies of American soldiers who died from the 1918-1919 pandemic, and the bodies of the Inuit people in Alaska, preserved in permanent ice. It was as if I was opening a top-secret file of the world. Taubenberger described. He has done this for 30 years, studying the Spanish flu virus to unlock the mystery of the most dangerous pandemic in history. Started in 1990. Taubenberger and colleagues meticulously collected shattered RNA fragments in the remains of Spanish flu viruses. By 1995, they had organized them into the first 8 genes. A decade later, Taubenberger completed the last 3 genes of about 13,000 base pairs in the viral genome in 2005. The work was selected by both leading scientific journals, Science and Lancet, to be the breakthrough of the year, because by successful sequencing of the viral gene, meaning the Spanish flu virus is ready to be revived, the mystery will finally be solved. Taubenberger transferred the genome that he has arranged to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. Here, they were introduced into cells by virologist Terence Stumpy to recreate the Spanish flu virus, reviving a top killer in history. They tested the virus on animals, first with mice. In the first test, the resurrected Spanish flu virus killed the mouse in just 3 to 5 days, with symptoms exactly the same as it did to humans in 1918. Stumpy. Taubenberger. The study authors reported that the virus also killed chicken embryos. Finally, they have deciphered the mystery. Spanish flu virus is actually a subtype of the H1N1 virus, infecting poultry. What will happen next? Don't forget to subscribe our channel and turn bell on for the second part.